Thanks to Carrie Ann and Scott and those that are helping us out with the technical pieces. Sean is going to provide us a bit of an introduction into what the roundtable, what our involvement has been with the roundtable. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, so he is doing it remotely from his desk. So we will start with him, and then we'll continue on with Monica regarding the roundtable work. So welcome, everybody.
Good. Thank you, Karen. And again, I'd like to apologize. I wasn't able to be there in person. A little bit of a glitch in terms of my scheduling. As soon as I'm done this introduction of Monica, I will head straight to Leduc and be able to join you guys there because I'm looking forward to that. In terms of, I guess if you look at the history that the department's had and its involvement in the roundtable, it goes all the way back to the ALMA days, the Alberta Livestock and Meat Agency. And this was back in 2014 when we first had the first roundtable meeting, and it was in the summer of 2014. If you go back to what I guess I've been talking about since I came to the ministry, it's all about social license. It's all about the challenges that we're faced in meeting some of the consumer expectations around things like food safety, animal welfare, environmental sustainability, and consumers are really demanding more and more transparency in terms of those things. And so really the focus of that has really become a top priority. So the roundtable is one example of where industry has taken the lead, and they've gotten together and they've made a real concerted effort, as Monica will probably walk you through, and how to label sustainability and what sustainability looks like. And the model that she's going to present you is unprecedented in terms of the kinds of participation it has right across the supply chain, as well as some of the nonprofit groups and what we call the civil society groups as well. So you've got a real holistic approach into defining what sustainability is, and I think that's going to give it quite a bit of credibility. I won't talk much more about that because Monica is going to cover a lot of that. I don't want to steal her thunder. What I do want to talk about is what the ministry itself is doing to support the efforts of the roundtable and social license in general. We've been involved. I am an ex officio member of the roundtable myself. I was able to have the pleasure of being elected onto it. I think it was back in Banff last year in 2016, and we've also had a number of staff that have been involved. I know that on some of the subcommittees, I know Carrie Ann has been involved in a lot of the measures and indicators committee. We've had Michelle McKinnon has been involved in various ways as well. So we have a lot of involvement in supporting the activities of the roundtable, which about a year or 2 years ago started off with the pilot project with McDonald's. But again, I won't get too much into that because I know Monica is probably going to give you a little more of that history as well. What you should know is that we've had quite a time in making sure that this has become a priority with the First Ministers of Agriculture, and we've been working very closely with them to get it on their agenda. So for the upcoming Growing Forward Agreement, which is now called the CAP, which is the Canadian Agriculture Partnership Agreement, that's the new name of the Growing Forward, even though we all call it Growing Forward 3. Public trust is one of the pillars or one of the themes under the new Growing Forward Agreement, and we are actively right now developing and doing program design that's going to support all public trust activities, which could include things like certification and assurance to consumers, and when that would include some of the activities that of the roundtable, and then Monica is going to talk to you about today as well. So just to give you a little bit of background. Again, I will try to be there in person later this afternoon to take part in the discussions and the input and how we can support the roundtable. But I think at this point, I'd like to introduce Monica, and Monica will give you a bit of background on herself and the work that she's done with the roundtable. I think I've been knowing Monica for a little over 2 years now. You'll find her very informative. I think at this time, Monica, if you're there, I'll turn the reins over to you and you can go ahead with your presentation.
Great, thank you, Sean. All right, can everybody hear me on the phone okay? This is the mic, right, for the phone? Yes. Okay. So, well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. This is a really full room. It's exciting to see so much interest in the work that we're doing. So like Sean mentioned, my name is Monica Hadarits, and I am the Programs and Verification Director for the Roundtable. And so my role right now is really focusing on getting our verification framework launched by the end of this year. So that's been my core role. I work with the Indicator Committee and the Verification Committee, two multi-stakeholder groups that are comprised of our membership, to make sure that what we're creating is going to meet the needs of our stakeholders. And so a little bit of background, Sean mentioned the Roundtable was formed in 2014, and so we were officially formed in 2014 after stakeholders got together to start talking about sustainability in the beef industry, and they really wanted to figure out where this conversation should land. And so there was a decision that mandate should fall underneath the umbrella of one national organization, and so that's when we were created. And I think I was supposed to mention something about the questions, right? Maybe hold them till after. Yeah, so maybe just if you have any questions, you know, unless you're really not following along, just let me know. But we'll hold the questions till the end, and then I think Karen's going to facilitate that, right? Monitor the chat. I'll monitor what's coming on. Okay. Perfect. So the vision of the organization is really around advancing sustainability and making sure that Canada is recognized as a global leader in sustainable beef production, so that it's economically viable, environmentally sound, and socially responsible. And so that's a really broad, you know, ambitious goal. And so we've narrowed that down. Our mission really is to facilitate that framework for the industry to be a leader in continuous improvement and sustainability. And how we're going to do that is through multi-stakeholder engagement, collaboration, communication, and science. So making sure we're taking a science-based approach. And so again, the definition that we've adopted, and this has come down from our sister organization at the global level. So there is a very similar organization as the Canadian Roundtable operating at the global level. And so at the global level, we're trying to make sure that all the conversations around sustainability in beef are happening in the global roundtable, and all the stakeholders are at that table. And then really our role is, as a regional roundtable, is to take that information that's being discussed and passed down from the global level and applying it to the context of Canada, because some of the issues that are happening in other countries, you know, they're not relevant in Canada. We are unique in some cases, and so that's really the direction that we're taking. So this is the definition. Sustainable beef is a socially responsible, environmentally sound, and economically viable product that prioritizes planet, people, animals, and progress. And again, it's a very broad definition, and so we have narrowed that down into 5 key principles, again, that we've adopted from the global. So we've taken the definition from global to ensure alignment globally in the discussion, and also in the principles and the criteria on what defines sustainability in the beef industry. And so when we talk about sustainability, we talk about natural resources, people in the community, animal health and welfare, food, and efficiency and innovation. So those are the 5 key principles when we think about sustainability at the roundtable, and when we're doing our verification framework or benchmarking, that's how we organize the themes basically around those 5 pillars. And one of the things that's different, how we've kind of differentiated ourselves from the global, is that we've added in, the pointer doesn't work on this, it's just about to, is that we've actually explicitly addressed economic viability in the 5 principles. This is something that's not found in the global principles and criteria guidance document, but it's something that we've heard really loud and clear from the perspective of our stakeholders, is that you can't really have true sustainability without having that economic viability piece. So a council has agreed to add it in explicitly. So anytime we're talking about these 5 pillars, so social and environmental, we're really talking about them with the underlying or underpinning theme that you need economic viability in that context as well. And so just wanted to bring you down to the, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the trust framework that's being developed at a national level. Okay, so there are efforts right now going on to, there's an increasing disconnect, like Sean was talking about, between the consumer and agriculture, right? So that divide is getting bigger and bigger, and there's so much miscommunication and misinformation. So there's an effort going on in Canada right now to try and bring the sustainability or the public trust and transparency and continuous improvement conversation within agriculture into one kind of framework, so that everybody or every commodity is kind of operating in the same, using the same language again, and kind of taking the same approach in order to meet the ultimate outcome, which is public trust, transparency, and continuous improvement. And so the trust framework is something that's been developed by this group of people, and essentially what they have is a hub. So they have the hub up here, and then they have doing the right thing, so that's one of the key pillars. And then having a trusted assurance or verification system is the other pillar, and then communication. And all those three things together help increase transparency, continuous improvement, and really ultimately bring increased public trust in agriculture in the sector. And so where we fit within that is that we're defining sustainable beef. So on the left-hand side there, doing the right thing. The trusted assurance system is building our verification framework that I'll talk a little bit more about. And then our communications piece is around leveraging our membership, our partners, and the media as much as possible to spread the word and help build that trust in the public space, because we can't do it just on our own. And so this is a diagram that we pulled from this national effort. And really the bullseye is building public trust in the agricultural sector in Canada. And there's a steering committee that is steering the direction of this group. And the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity is really doing the research and the training around that. So that's where they fall in. And then our space is really in the adoption and implementation phase. So that's where all the value chains in the sectors would fall in. And then on the outer ring is what Tim McConnell calls the amplifiers. So it's really working with those stakeholders who are not really engaging in, building the assurance system or defining what the right thing is, but it's helping amplify and distribute that and disseminate that information more broadly. So working with food and farm care, for example, ag in the classroom, ag more than ever. So that's a little bit of background of where we are kind of positioning ourselves within Canada and that conversation that's happening, and also talked a little bit about the Global Roundtable and how we align with the efforts that are going on globally. So really what the organization, the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, we're driven by our membership. That's really our strength, is that we have currently over 109 members, and that's growing pretty rapidly. So we have representation from academic institutions, food and agriculture business, non-governmental organizations, processors, producer organizations, and retail and food service. And so those categories are the ones that make up our voting membership. And then we also have observers, and that includes ex officio or government, academic advisors, youth, and individuals. And this is a really simple diagram of our governance structure. So we have a council that is elected every year, like Sean mentioned, at our annual general meeting, and they represent the membership, and the council is really the ones that are making the operational decisions for the organization. The General Assembly, every organization that is a voting member has a vote. All of our committees are comprised of our members, and participation may also be granted to non-members as well, depending on the case. And then we have staff supporting all three of those. So that's really the structure of our organization. We're membership-based. All the members that pay dues are part of the General Assembly, and then they elect the council every year at our AGM. We have three core pillars of work: sustainability benchmarking, verification framework, and sustainability projects. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those. So for sustainability benchmarking, we did a really large study that we launched in October of 2016 to really get a better understanding of what the social, economic, and environmental performance of the Canadian beef industry was. And we benchmarked that performance in 2014. We launched that in 2016. And after we had all these baseline numbers, we decided we needed to develop a strategy to help target our efforts, because sustainability is it's a big conversation. And so we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on the areas of highest impact for our members. And so we got the membership together at our semi-annual last April, and they worked together. We had breakout discussions, and they worked together to help us develop our sustainability strategy. And that strategy is really guiding our efforts and sets targets for the next 5 years on where we want to move the needle at a national level on sustainability. And so we did, like I mentioned, we did an economic assessment, an environmental assessment, and a social assessment. And these are, I don't want to go into too many details, but the reports are available on our website. So we have summary reports available on our website, but we also have the full reports available for download. So they're about 500 pages long, but it talks about the methods and, you know, all of those, like the data sources and all that kind of information that may be of interest to you. So if you want to check that out, you can just visit our website. But we wanted to make it digestible for somebody who would actually read, you know, a 30-page document. So we have a really nice graphically designed summary report there as well. But that we posted basically all of the information related to that study because we're really about openness and transparency and building that trust. So I won't get into too many of the details, but at a high level, we had, for the environmental assessment, we did a traditional life cycle analysis, but then we also complemented that with what we call the land use assessment. So there were some items that were of importance to the beef industry that aren't typically included in a life cycle analysis. For example, biodiversity assessments, soil carbon stock estimates, and water use and risk. And Carrie-Anne was on that steering committee, so she can tell you a bit more about that. So we complemented that with, we've developed methods and new methods to assess those types of indicators in that environmental assessment, just to give us a really comprehensive picture of the environmental impact of this sector. And so we have 2 functional units in that report. One is a kilogram of live weight. So the results are presented for the production stage. So that kilogram of live weight just tells you what it is, what the value of, or what that indicator is to produce on the production side of things. So just includes up to kill, essentially. And then kilogram of packed boneless beef includes the entire life cycle of that beef product. So from birth to consumption. And so we really wanted to make sure that we gave not just the production side of things the impact, but the entire life cycle of that beef up until consumption in the household. And so you'll see that we have all of our results for those indicators in which it's pertinent. We have both functional units on there just so that we are doing the whole entire value chain service and representing the whole picture there. And so for water, for example, we assessed blue water, and we found that it takes 631 liters of blue water to produce 1 kilogram of packed boneless beef. And then, or if you're looking at the other functional unit, 235 liters to produce 1 kilogram of live weight. And one thing that's really important that I learned really quickly from Deloitte is that you can't compare these functional units, but they give you a picture of the different impacts along the supply chain. So in terms of greenhouse gas footprint, we were really excited to get these results too. So what we found was that it's 30.8 carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of live weight to produce 1 kilogram of live weight. Sorry, that's for the boneless beef. So here we go. 30.8 carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of packed boneless beef. So that's when you're looking at an entire package of beef up until consumption. That is the greenhouse gas footprint. But when you're looking at a live weight, which is a more commonly used metric, we have one of the lowest footprints in the world, which is really exciting for us to be able to have that science to back up that conversation when we're talking to our stakeholders. What we found is 11.4 carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of live weight. So that's something that's been picked up pretty broadly in the media because it is something that we should be really proud of, and a lot of that has to do with production efficiencies in Canada. For soil carbon stock, we found that the lands used by beef producers store about 1.5 billion tons of carbon. That's been a really hot topic lately as well. So that was something that now we have national information on and can communicate about. For land use, the beef industry uses about 21 million hectares of land in Canada. And one thing that when we did that biodiversity assessment, we also found that even though the land used by beef producers accounts for 33% of the ag land, That land accounts for 68% of the wildlife habitat capacity on those same lands. So it's a really disproportionate amount of habitat that those producers are managing and responsible for. And then meat waste is something that came out that was really interesting that I hadn't thought about, is that 19% of edible bone-free meat is wasted from secondary processing to consumption. So that's a huge area of impact that we are trying to work on as well. On the social side of things, we looked at all of these stakeholders for each stage. So for cattle operations, we looked at workers, local community, value chain actors, society, consumers. For processors, we did the same thing, and we went through the whole entire list. And for the social assessment, the results are basically categorized according to risk. So the red are higher risk, and the green are very low risk. And so we looked at, for the social assessment, we looked at, different indicators related to health and safety, animal care, working conditions, socioeconomic commitment, and what we found was that the industry is doing really, really well. There were a few hotspots that came out, 4 in particular. That is the rights of foreign workers at the national level. At the distribution level, median income was something that was raised as a hotspot. And then for the supplier level, we had the rate of fatal and non-fatal injuries. And then for cattle operations, workload was something that came out as a hotspot. So these are some areas that if you have a look at our sustainability strategy, they are areas that we're trying to focus on because they came out as hotspots, and that's where we're targeting more of our efforts. And then on the economic side of things, we looked at 4 different indicators. Just wanted to report back on one that's been really important for our producers to highlight, is that the average long-term margins for a 200-head cow herd provides an annual income of about $17,559, which is below the Statistics Canada low-income threshold cutoff. So that's something that, again, when we talk about the economic viability piece under our 5 principles, these producers are already operating at a really low margin. So when we're asking them to top that with sustainability and potentially an audit, we really need to make sure that we're cognizant of this statistic when we're talking to them and developing our program. And that's one, it's actually explicit within our mandate, is to make sure that it can be cost effective. And so between 74 and 85% of the cow-calf sector relies on an off-farm income. So those are some stats that came out of our economic assessment. And these are just a summary of the goals for the sustainability strategy. So we have basically goal 1 is build a stronger, more united Canadian beef sustainability community. We have a few around reducing the greenhouse gas footprint, enhancing ecosystem services, enhancing riparian health, reducing post-harvest meat waste, which is something that I just chatted about. On the social side of things, promote farm safety, promote excellence in animal care. Of course, that's a topic of high importance. Support the further development, monitoring, and dissemination of best practices regarding antimicrobial use. We just had an expert panel review our indicator on animal health product use because this is such an important topic from the public's perspective and an important conversation in sustainability for the beef industry too. And then on the economic front, we have 2 goals: increase the financial viability of beef production in Canada and increase demand for Canadian beef through consumer awareness of sustainable beef production. So these are the high-level goals. For each goal in our sustainability strategy, we have key performance indicators, action items, and targets. So we have, these are the high-level goals, and we have fleshed out exactly kind of some action items and where we want to get to. But just wanted to flag that for you. That's all available on our website as well. And that's our website there. So CRSB.ca, and then we have our areas of work, and you can just click, there's a drop-down menu where it says sustainability benchmarking. Should I keep going? On to the next pillar? That's just the first. Okay, so the Verified Sustainable Beef Framework is the next big piece, and that's what I have been focusing a lot of my attention on for the last 2 years that I've been with the Roundtable. And essentially, this framework is, just wanted to, before I launch into the details of the framework and the rationale, it's really what we've heard from our users, our end users, is that they want to be able to communicate about the sustainability of beef to their consumers. So we want to be able to talk to the consumer about sustainability. And in order to do that, in order to have a claim that is consumer facing, you need to have a very strong assurance scheme or assurance system or verification system that supports those claims in order for, well, you need to make sure they're credible, those claims. You need to make sure that they're transparent and that they're truthful. And so that's really what we're building. We're building a framework that will support these end user claims to the consumer at the end of the day. So that's what the Verified Sustainable Beef Framework is. Some of you who have worked on our committees or have been to our meetings, we also call it the verification framework. So they're the same thing. I know we use a lot of synonyms, so it gets a little bit confusing even internally. But for now, we're calling it the Verified Sustainable Beef Framework. So that's essentially what this system is. And so that's the second pillar under the trust framework, is developing a verification or assurance scheme. And so the mission of, council is currently working on a business strategy for a Verified Sustainable Beef Framework, and the draft mission right now is to develop a framework that drives the advancement and recognition of beef sustainability in Canada through providing a world-class operation-level verification framework. So that's the mission. And the purpose, I've got quite a few here. Again, they're draft, being reviewed by council. Advance beef sustainability in Canada, recognize leadership and best practice within the industry, ensure a consistent, robust, and meaningful definition of sustainable production in Canada, avoid duplicating efforts, support supply chains who are interested in making sourcing commitments and subsequent communications about the sustainability of the beef that they're sourcing, enable consumers to purchase sustainably sourced product, and support the understanding of sustainable beef production in Canada. And so when we talk about our framework, we have the stakeholders who are kind of engaging in the framework, and then we have the tools that those stakeholders are going to be using. So the verification framework management, this diagram here talks about the different stakeholders and how they're engaging in the framework. So we have the standard system owner is the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. So we're setting the framework. We're the owner of the indicators that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, the chain of custody requirements, of the claims, and all those types of things. So the standard system owner is the CRSB. The oversight body is a third-party company that we're hiring to oversee the framework. It was really important for our verification committee to have that third party overseeing it, just to make for added credibility and transparency. We're going to have certification bodies, so the CRSB is not going to be delivering any audits. We're going to have certification bodies who are delivering audits on our behalf. And so that there's the middle square here are the certification bodies, and then we have auditors who are actually going to be on the ground doing the audit, and then we have the clients who are going to be the beef producers or the primary processors, the slaughter facilities. So those are the stakeholders in our framework. And these are the different pieces of the framework that all come together in the middle here to support those consumer-facing claims. So the indicators are, we've developed indicators for beef production, and so there's one set of indicators that apply to cow-calf backgrounding feedlot, and then we have another set of indicators that apply to the beef processors. And our verification committee decided at their last meeting that the only operation or the only facilities that are in scope for this iteration of the program are the slaughter facilities. So for a consumer-facing claim to be able to be made, the beef needs to pass, or the cattle needs to pass through a verified cow-calf, a verified backgrounding, a verified feedlot, and a verified slaughter facility. And if that beef moves, or if the cattle and then the beef moves through that supply chain, then that product qualifies for a consumer-facing claim. So that's what those are the indicators, is what we're going to measure along those operations and what we're going to audit to, essentially. So we have those two sets of indicators. The indicator development, just wanted to touch on that a little bit. They were developed by a multi-stakeholder committee. They are outcomes-based, so this is a little bit of a different approach than most programs that are out there that are sustainability-based. we are not looking to prescribe practices for producers or slaughter facilities to undertake in order to be deemed sustainable. We are looking at the outcomes that they need to be achieving, and how they achieve those outcomes is flexible. We're not defining that. We're defining the outcome that needs to be achieved, and then the producers and the processors have to show evidence that they are meeting those outcomes. So that's a little bit of a difference. It makes it a little bit more tricky to audit. It's a little bit more open for interpretation at the front end, but it meets the needs of beef production in Canada, because the production systems are so different from west to east, and even within province, it's, you know, every production system is different. So we're looking at the outcomes, and that's what the indicators represent. They're based on consensus, so the committee has reached consensus on the indicators. We're currently doing a third round of revisions, and we're going to go out for membership review. They're based on expert opinion, grounded in science, and we're following the International Social and Environmental Accreditation and Labeling standard setting code. So this is an international organization that sets guidelines and good practice around developing indicators, their standards, and so we've been following that really closely. And part of that is public consultation. So part of the ISO guidance is that you need to do 2 rounds of public consultation, one 60-day and one 30-day consultation. So we've gone through a 60-day and a 30-day for the indicators for beef production. So this is where we're at right now, is doing draft 3. And then we're going to send that out for membership review one last time, and then we're going to finalize. And then we are just ramping up, we just sent the latest draft this morning to the indicator committee to get approval to launch our 30-day public consultation in this week or 2. So that's kind of a status update of where those indicators are at. And then after the indicators, so we do have that indicator committee. So we have one committee focused solely on developing the indicators. And then we have another committee that's focused on the verification side of things. And they get all these 4 other squares. So they get the scoring system. So once we have the indicators, we need to figure out how we're going to score them. And so they've been developing that process. We are developing our assurance protocols. So really what audit cycle needs to look like, what auditor requirements we're going to have, what does the management system of the certification body, what kind of requirements are we going to have around the management system of the certification bodies who might be interested in delivering audits on our behalf. So that's kind of all of the auditing requirements that we're going to have. Chain of custody is essentially the movement of cattle and then beef, tracking that through the supply chain to ensure the credibility of the claim that's being made at the end of the day. And then equivalencies is really looking at what are other programs doing and how well do they align with the CRSB, and then recognizing those programs so that we can reduce duplication. And if a producer is already on one program, then maybe it's so similar to the CRSB or the same, if it's found to be the same in the equivalency benchmarking process, then we can maybe just recognize their achievement at a certain level. And so again, like I mentioned before, the development has been really, the guiding principles for the verification side of things has been around, it needs to be realistic for the industry, so for producers and processors, but it needs to be credible to consumers and will secure their trust. So we need to make sure we're balancing that out. That's constantly a discussion within our committee, is we need something very robust that's credible, but when we also need it to be practical and implementable. So really trying to balance that out. Scalable for long-term industry adoption, cost-effective for the CRSB to manage. So right now there's 2.5 staff on the CRSB, so we need to make sure we're creating a system that's realistic for us to manage. And then drives value for industry participants so that people use it, right? We want to make sure people are using it and will use it. And then again, ISEAL has some guidance in their assurance code on how to develop that. So how to develop verification systems. So we've really been following that closely to make sure we have all the pieces that we need to have when we launch. We have done some field testing. So from the production side of things, we did some test audits with 21 producers across Canada just to see if what we had on paper really made sense in the field. And we got really good feedback. We had the producers fill out surveys. We had the auditors that we hired 3 auditors to cover all the provinces. And so we trained them and we sent them out, and they had really constructive feedback as well that we're incorporating in. And then from a communication side of things, that's a piece that my colleague Andrea White's leading. She started in January. And so really we need to figure out, now we have our indicators, so we're going to have our verification framework, our verification side of things, and then we need to nail down the communication. So that's really what she's been working on lately, is developing and implementing the plan for the CRSB, but also for the Verified Sustainable Beef Framework. And so our current communications and marketing priorities are around developing the claims and standards to use those claims that support the verification framework. So there's a committee dedicated to working on that. Developing the marketing strategy for Verified Sustainable Beef. So now that we have the framework, we really need to market it. We need the public to trust it and want to, and our end users to want to source through it. So we're really developing the marketing side of things for that, and developing a plan for the launch, which is on December 6th and 7th in Edmonton. So December 6th is our annual general meeting, and December 7th will be the launch of our framework. And I think I'm doing okay for time? Okay. And that's kind of a synopsis of what we're working on. The one thing that I forgot to put a slide in on the projects, we do have one project that we're playing more of a project management role just to test out the waters on how that might work. And that's one of the species, one of the SARPAL projects in Alberta, so the one that's supporting cows and fish and multi-SAR. But we're just playing a more administrative role in that context. And really, the goal is to launch the framework and then to start developing projects that build on our sustainability strategy and also on some of the gaps that we found in the verification framework development side of things too. So that was the other piece of the other pillar that we're working on. That we have one item in there, but we're really trying to ramp that up after we launch in December. So that's